is it one's ego or spirit that decide what is true? I know that we see in the presentation, whenever we act from the ego, whatever the result is usually contrary, or there's always pushback, and it creates polarity, so that the truth that we'll have from the ego most likely is going to be the horizontal truth. So, but I'll let the panelists elaborate on that.
The ego. What is the ego? It's our familiar state of consciousness, and it always has this so negative ring, or ego, egoistic, and so on. But even the best of us lives out of an ego consciousness, in a way of, because the me, myself, and I, that's all. This is our state of consciousness. And anything different, like state of consciousness wise, this is what we talked about, based on this spark, this particle of the divine spirit within us. But in our I state of consciousness, or with the state of consciousness that identifies as me and the outside and the others, is not able to connect to it. And this is, again, it's where the Jordan is the border. We reach the border, we cannot continue. So that's first. And also, oh, one more thing, the negative ring the ego has. And in a way, we have to look at the state of consciousness of I consciousness, identification we have today. It's like a temporary state of consciousness we have reached through evolution, if you think of the plant, the animal, and so on. But it's not the purpose in itself. The next step then is to realize it's not me, it's not the John, it's the other one. But the ego is necessary. It's like a tool that helps us to become ready as human beings for this next step. So now to your question about the truth. Wuji, you mentioned this, today's truth and tomorrow's truth. In our familiar state of consciousness, what we perceive as truth, there's a limit to it. And in a way, that's okay. But at the same time, and this is where self-knowledge comes in, it's important to be aware of that whatever I perceive or think it's the truth, it's only subjective. It's not a permanent truth. The truth, let's say in capital letters, we, in our I state of consciousness, we cannot even grasp it. But there is an inner knowing and yearning that tells us there is something else. And we strive for it, and at the same time know we, as an I, cannot grasp it. And this is where earlier in the presentation I mentioned I have to become the servant or the vehicle for this spark within.
I like the question, and I like the fact that it's very modern in the way that it's put. This relationship between the decision and therefore some sort of agency and the truth. Who decides what is true? What is the truth? And to decide, well, one needs to be free. To make a choice, one truly needs to be free in the first place. And if we think of the ego, we look at the ego, what is the ego? The ego is the projection of a certain identity. It's almost the illusion of the identity that actually, if we look at its basis, if we look at its roots, is in fact a play of energies, of forces, of influences, of memories. Whether we look at karma, whether we look at family, society, culture, all these elements come together to create the illusion of I am. And based on the illusion, we make a choice, or we create a certain relationship with what we perceive to be true, right? Almost as a projection on a wall, on the wall of our consciousness. And so we can only decide what is true if we start opening up to that freedom. But that freedom is not of the ego. The freedom comes from the spirit, which does not abide to the laws of this nature. It does not have a relationship of action reaction with the forces that regulate and govern our natural consciousness. And then truth becomes a state of consciousness. Truth becomes the ability to perceive the reality outside of ourselves, not just as compared to I am, but that new consciousness that finds its roots in the spirit and its unity with everything else. Then I am is not the I, is not the ego, but is the original true self, is the divine all, that it's in everything and everyone. And the truth becomes then something completely different.